Hello?
I think we're live.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the promotional interview with Karen Straughan, our speaker at the regional conference in Vancouver. I hope this interview will be kind of a foretaste for what's to come, and hopefully it'll get you guys to sign up and come to the regional conference on November 7th at I think the venue it's at Robson Square UBC. So do sign up. The link should be somewhere in the low bar. So yeah, let's get right into it. I think.
Yeah, let's just dive right in.
Yeah. So how are you doing, Karen?
I'm doing all right. It's you know I decided that I wasn't gonna postpone tonight's podcast to go and watch some speaker, some journalist give a talk tonight. I kept my commitment. Also, it probably had something to do with the fact that I'm lazy, but and not really presentable. But as far as
would it kill you to put on some foundation? I mean, come on.
No, I don't. I don't ever put on foundation. I don't wear any makeup at all. I think almost every public appearance that I've done after the Libertarian Party of New York's annual convention, I haven't worn any makeup at all. So.
Well, you look great without it, so you really don't have to.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
No. But no, I'm good. I'm good. Busy, but good.
Right. Yeah, I feel you with that.
Mm.
So let's just dive right into it. I think a lot of the people watching right now are probably libertarians, and libertarianism, especially in the context of Students for Liberty, the student organization that's hosting this, is kind of an umbrella. It's kind of an umbrella term. You know, there's minarchism, there's anarchism, there's left libertarianism. So I just want to know, where do you kind of stand politically with relationship to libertarianism? Like, from what I understand, you're like kind of libertarian. You tell me.
I'm very much for decriminalizing everything that you could possibly decriminalize, and that I do believe there are some behaviors, some irresponsible behaviors that harm society, and that those could be those really should be dealt with through social stigma, a lot of them, and just general education and trying to persuade people to behave in a responsible manner. But yeah, there are certain things that I think, like drugs, prostitution, things like that. Why are we not legalizing all of that? We're so desperate for taxes. Why are we spending money trying to stop a problem that will never go away? Why aren't we regulating and taxing it? And allowing these, allowing sex workers to have access, unfettered access to the help from the police when they've been assaulted or robbed or abused by the people who are supposed to be protecting them. Why would we have a system that does nothing but cost, doesn't stop anything, does nothing but cost us money? Right. So essentially, that's where I stand on all of those sort of social problems. There are some things also that I would really like to see removed from the criminal system as much as possible. I think that certain forms of domestic violence, and there are various forms of domestic violence, but one of them that's really, really common is actually called common couple violence, and it's usually mutual, and it's usually very minor. It's a slap, it's a push. It doesn't tend to escalate. It tends to arise when there's like a huge amount of stress from outside coming down, mother-in-law's visiting, or somebody lost a job and you're going bankrupt or whatever, right? And these kinds of incidents, I don't think that they should be dealt with in the criminal system. I think that these people should be put through a different pipeline, one that's really taking a public health sort of perspective on it, and getting them the help that they both need, because usually it's both of them who are you know, perpetrating that particular form of violence. So, I mean, like, there are a whole bunch of things that I'd really like government to just get out of. And so as far as my views, I guess I would be socially extremely liberal and fiscally very conservative.
Okay, well that sounds quite libertarian to me.
There you go.
Yeah, that's how I kind of consider myself as well, which is actually that's very close to classical liberalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think liberal, the word liberal, has really gotten a bum rap of late, and a lot of it has to do with well, it's a lot of it has to do with what my talk is going to be about at this conference, which is essentially is feminism a friend of liberty, right? So, and I really don't think it is.
Right, we're gonna get right into that actually. So my question, and I know the answer to this, but this is a question that a lot of listeners probably want to know, is why anti-feminist? I mean, it may seem strange to people who see feminism as mostly good, especially historically. So why do you identify as anti-feminist, Karen?
There's a large number of reasons why I identify as anti-feminist. Like, one of the primary ones is that feminists lie. They lie and they lie and they lie and they lie. They lie about the nature of men and women. They lie about how society works. They lie about pervasive problems in society. In fact, there was just one study that was done of 27 universities in the United States, and they came up with, they used the good old feminist survey instrument that was designed back in the 1980s. To determine that 1 in 5 women has been sexually assaulted, right? And even if you want to like get into the definitions and say, because in this survey would have captured women who had been asked repeatedly for a date, that would be considered, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. They would be part of the 1 in 5. But one of the things about this study was there was a 19% response rate, and that's an extremely low percentage of respondents to a survey that's distributed quite widely. And there was one little figure in this study that can actually be compared against actual figures that we know. And that was the percentage of women who participated in the study, 2.2%, said that they had been victims of sexual misconduct on campus and had reported it to their university. So 2.2% of women who did the survey said that they had reported sexual misconduct to their university. Now, in the U.S., that information is a matter of public record. That's under the Clary Act, under Title IX. They have to disclose those numbers every year, the numbers of reports of sexual misconduct. So if you actually extrapolated that 2.2% onto the number of women in college today in America, the number of actual reports would have to be about 40 times higher than it is to make the number of actual reports to universities jive with the number of reports that this survey would indicate there would have to be, right? So there are 40 times fewer actual reports, than you could extrapolate from the survey. So the survey is off by a factor of 40, right? But they still say 1 in 5 women has experienced this. So, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, some of the stuff, and they're changing legislation based on these figures. They're using these figures to convince legislators to pass all kinds of laws that erode due process and make all kinds of problems on campuses. So, there you go.
Yeah.
That's one reason. And another reason is that I just think that essentially, like, we've been duped, and that we're setting ourselves down a very bad path. As far as you know, you look at safe spaces on campus, trigger warnings, all of these things that are spearheaded. I just read today that over 1,700 men now in New York City have been arrested for manspreading on mostly empty subway cars. Right? So you're looking at, 14 people in a giant subway car and a guy's sitting with his knees more than 7 inches apart and he's under arrest. So, I mean, it just seems authoritarian, it seems tyrannical, and it's full of bullshit. So, yeah, no, I mean, like, what I'm saying is women having the right to vote, no problem. Women having the right to bodily autonomy, no problem, right? All of those things. But there is a whole host of other things attached to feminism that maybe the general public isn't necessarily aware of, and they're not necessarily aware, even if they're aware of those things, they're not aware just how bullshit they are, that we have to consider when we're considering feminism. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people, when you say anti-feminist, they're like, you don't believe women deserve the right to vote? That's usually the train of thought.
It is, and people ask me that, like, and they'll kind of frown and they'll say, so what, you don't think women should have the right to vote? And I'll be like, no, but here's an example of what I'm getting at. And most of the time, in fact, like, I've never had a bad reaction from, and I'm not reticent about my views. I talk to people at work about my views. I talk to the regular customers about my views. I talk to the cashier at the store about my views and what I do, and all of these things. And you get that initial confusion that, like, so suffrage, is that what we're talking? Or women being able to work and go to school, and no.
But even the whole suffrage movement, there's a lot of mythology surrounding that as well, no?
Oh, there is. There's a huge amount of mythology surrounding it, and they say history is written by the victors, and so what your kids are learning in school is really not a clear picture of what was actually going on back then. And suffrage was very much presented the way abortion rights are presented in the United States today.
Right.
So you essentially you have feminist groups, National Organization for Women, and other groups like that, essentially saying that abortion rights in the U.S. are a matter of old white men dictating what women can and can't do with their bodies, right? So it's a male versus female thing. But in reality, there are more women than men in the U.S. who are pro-life. Out of the people who are pro-choice, there are more women than men in the U.S. who want restrictions put on abortion. So this is not, and there is a very, very strong women's lobby on both sides of the issue. So this is not a men versus women issue at all. And suffrage was the exact same way. Women's suffrage had a very, very strong female lobby on both sides of the issue. And I remember seeing one British politician quoted who essentially said something along the lines of, I have never once heard of a situation where a politician was being had it demanded that he give something to a population that the population was indifferent to, right? However, in this case, I'm being asked to give something to a population who is very loudly saying they don't want it. Right? They're not just indifferent, they don't want it.
And they didn't want it for good reason, right?
They didn't want it because they thought citizenship, and citizenship at that time was, because full citizenship for men was attached to all kinds of responsibilities. Men were 100% financially responsible for their families, including their widowed mothers and their unmarried sisters and their adult daughters, who all had a certain privilege to expect to be supported if they were unable or unwilling to work. Men had a responsibility to comply with hue and cry laws. So a man could, who was a bystander, could be held criminally accountable for not intervening when a crime was being committed. A man had a obligation to obey a police officer, to help an officer detain a suspect or quell a crowd or do something like that. He had an obligation legally to, if a sheriff formed a posse and said, yeah, you're here, get on your horse, he had a legal obligation to do that. He had a legal obligation to be in a bucket brigade if a fire marshal commandeered him during fire, no matter what he may have, even if he had better things to do. And he was draftable in war, right? And these were all considered to be the responsibilities and obligations of citizenship. So when you have something that, comes with rights and with obligations, and those obligations, I don't think women would have wanted to be subject to hue and cry laws, or subject to, be drafted into the military in wartime, or posses when you're chasing outlaws. I don't think women would have wanted those responsibilities, and they believed that full citizenship rights they thought it was a package deal, right? Little did they realize that, of course, they were going to get the vote for free, so I don't know why they even bothered fighting it, right? Because none of those responsibilities came for women when they got suffrage. Despite the fact that most of the men who fought in World War I didn't have the vote in the US, Canada, and the UK.
That's astonishing. It just kind of sounds like men maybe didn't have it that easy, like they weren't that privileged or something.
Yeah, no, I know. It's the most amazing thing because, prior to feminist activism, the fathers got, sort of there's a default assumption that the father would get custody of the children after divorce, and that was because he was 100% financially responsible for them, and so he would get the kids, and his ex-wife owed him nothing, and owed the kids nothing. She was free and clear. I mean, she might be penniless, depending on who was at fault for the breakdown of the marriage, but she was free and clear. She didn't owe anybody anything. Then Caroline Norton in the UK lobbied strong and hard enough, convinced legislators to bring in the Tender Years Doctrine, which switched the norm to default mother custody, but it didn't switch the financial responsibility at all. So now you had, essentially the default was that mothers got young children who were not working age, so children under 10, who could not earn their own income. And fathers still got the bill. So now, no matter who was at fault, even if she was at fault for the breakdown of the marriage, she still got lots of alimony because he was still responsible to support the household of his minor children, and she was now head of that household. So we had a situation that we call now male patriarchal privilege, where men got the kids and the bill. And yet, when we switched it over, and feminists will say this even now, right? Default mother custody is actually misogyny because it relies on this assumption, this misogynistic patriarchal assumption that women are the better caregivers. And so it's sexism against women, and and they're not going to fight it or anything. In fact, they're going to fight to keep it in place, but it's still part of patriarchy, right? Oh my God, it's just, ugh.
Why are you so hard on the feminists, Karen?
Why am I so hard? Because they're bullshitty. They could take any situation and twist it around. Like, all roads lead to misogyny. So you could have a man that gets lynched over a false rape accusation, and the woman doesn't suffer any kind of punishment whatsoever, and they will say that happened because of our misogynistic patriarchal system. Right? It actually happened because society hates women.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
No.
then they drop the mic and walk off the stage.
Yeah, you have to take that as face value. The underlying theory it's not that that's questioned. You can't question that. It's just how you apply the theory. But the theory is there, and it has to. That's an axiom. It's axiomatic. You can't question it.
Every instance of discrimination is caused by misogyny, essentially, is what it boils down to. And so any discrimination against men would be secondary misogyny or a side effect of misogyny or a byproduct, an unwanted byproduct of misogyny, or patriarchal privilege backfiring. So, yeah.
So you're really outspoken about your concern with men's rights and men's issues. My question to you is, do you think the state is a good tool for furthering men's rights and resolving men's issues?
I think that the state has bunged things up quite badly enough as it is with the Violence Against Women Act and some of the bureaucratic nightmares that I had a friend, I don't know if any of your viewers would have heard of him, but Earl Silverman, who lived in Calgary, and he had he was a man whose wife was abusive, and when he left her, he went looking for resources and found none. He essentially found a bunch of resources that referred him to batterer treatment programs because that was the assumption, was that he was the abuser. So he decided he was going to open up a hotline, and he operated this hotline out of his own pocket for about 20 years and manned it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 20 years, taking calls from men in crisis. And close to, I guess it was in the early 2000s, he managed to secure a single $800 government grant. Yes, yes. Okay, so we have a federal government just at the federal level that spends something like $250 million a year on domestic violence services for women. And this man managed to get himself a single $800 government grant over the course of 20 years. Anyhow, he was trying to get funding for a shelter that he'd opened up. He had actually purchased a house, he was living there, but operating a shelter out of it, and he was trying to get government funding for it. And one of the problems with that was because domestic violence is definitionally under Canadian law and policy, it's politically, it is considered a women's issue. Everything to do with domestic violence has to be vetted by Status of Women Canada. So the Ministry for the Status of Women is the one that authorizes the provincial government to free up funds for victims of domestic violence. Now, Status of Women Canada doesn't have to be equitable by gender. They are a ministry for women, specifically for women. They don't have to serve anybody other than women. So essentially he would go to the province and the province would say, well, you have to get authorization from Status of Women Canada. So he would go to Status of Women Canada and they would say, well, all of the funding comes from the province. So go back to the province. So he would go back to the province. They would say, well, yes, we have funding for that, but we can't authorize the release of any funds without the authorization of Status of Women Canada because domestic violence is politically a women's issue. So he would go back to Status of Women Canada, and Status of Women Canada would say, well, we have no mandate to help men. Go back to the province. And then, so he ends up trying to sue through human rights legislation in Canada, and of course, males are not a protected group under Canadian human rights legislation. So they essentially told him the first time he tried to get a hearing that it is impossible for anyone to discriminate against men legally, like officially, technically, because it's not illegal to discriminate against men, so there's no law against it, so you can't sue anybody for it. So the law itself discriminates against men by saying that it's okay to discriminate against men. So he went back with an argument that essentially said that as society and circumstances change, the law needs to change too, and the judge, and this whole time he's representing himself pro se against two lawyers, one hired by the government and the other hired by the provincial network of women's shelters. Okay, so it's just him against these two lawyers. He convinces the judge that yes, the law needs to change. But the judge then, or the adjudicator then says, however, there's nobody in the government, there's no ministry or department or individual even whose job it is to fund, to provide male, funding for male victims of domestic violence. Therefore, there's nobody you can sue. There's nobody for you to sue. Because that person doesn't exist, you can't sue them for discrimination.
Didn't he end up committing suicide?
He did. He did. He ended up, after running his shelter for 2 years, he ended up having to sell it. He ran out of money, and I guess he was very, very despondent about his, he'd just been denied his second hearing, and he had actually sort of gone way over the top. He had committed what he felt was just enough of a crime that they would maybe prosecute him, and all of this stuff would actually end up on the public record, right? Because thus far there is really no public record of it. So he figured if they actually put him on the stand, all of this would come out in the open. And the moment that they realized that that was sort of what he was betting on, they dropped the charges. And yeah, he closed down his shelter, he sold the house, and the moment that it switched hands, the moment that the buyer took possession, was the next day he was found hanging in the garage. And he left a suicide note saying he hoped his death would maybe help wake people up. Right?
Wow.
So,
those are the kind of stories that really make me feel like remind my purpose as someone who's
yeah.
yeah.
You know what?
And this whole scenario just it just exemplifies another tenet of feminism
Well,
that is
you know what?
such a big problem, is gendering issues that aren't necessarily gendered, like domestic violence.
Yeah, no, and what really bothered me was I don't think his body was even cold before feminists on Huffington Post and Slate and Salon and all these places came out of the woodwork and wrote articles about how he was just a very uncooperative man who just couldn't do what it took to work within the system. Right? That, of course, everybody would want to help him, except he was confrontational and refused to work within the system. And I'm thinking to myself, the system says domestic violence is a women's issue, and therefore it goes through Status of Women Canada. And Status of Women Canada doesn't have to give any money to men. So how do you work within that system as a man?
Yeah, that's really insane. So I guess that's a resounding no in terms of is the state a good tool?
It's really not. It's really not. I mean, I would love it if we could just get. I would love to see domestic violence no longer be a specific crime. Right? This is something that can be handled through simple assault and battery laws, through simple verbal assault laws, through simple extortion laws, simple intimidation laws, harassment laws, all of that. There does not need the whole reason why we have laws specific to domestic violence is so that we can gender things like assault and homicide and harassment and verbal assault and verbal abuse and all of these things, right? So that we can gender them and essentially define them through a male perpetrator, female victim lens in the context of the law, right? That's the only reason we have that.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me too. To be honest, I would have to agree with you on that. Another question that I have, or at least something I'd like you to comment on, is when I joined Students for Liberty as a campus coordinator, I was actually quite surprised by the large number of feminists identifying libertarians. I guess I was surprised because of my knowledge of how feminism has a history of utilizing the state to achieve their ends, often quite unjustly so. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, about kind of the legacy of feminism using the state to achieve their ends.
Oh God! I mean, like it's been right from the get-go. It's essentially been right from the word go. Feminism has. I mean, you even see the suffragettes. A lot of them were also involved in the temperance movement, and even before women had the vote, the Women's Christian Temperance Union and their sort of suffragette allies managed to convince most of the U.S. to prohibit alcohol, right? And one of the ways they did it was they used to go from town to town and put on plays where you would have a man drinking. He'd come home from work, he'd start drinking, and then he'd beat his wife, right? And so it was like, when men drink, they beat their wives, so let's ban alcohol, right? And you know, the country bought it. They were like, oh my goodness, these horrible rapey, beaty men that beat and rape their wives, like, oh my god, and they don't work. They don't go to work the next day to earn money to support them, like these poor women, right? And but yeah, no, they've had a very, very authoritarian streak, an authoritarian streak a mile wide, right from the very beginning. And when it really comes down to it, they want they want more of the government pie. They want they want to lobby to increase say, or decrease the amount of child support arrearage that's going to land a guy in jail. They want that reduced from $5,000 to $2,500 or whatever. So if you lose your job and you're unemployed for a month, you're going to jail, right? Because feminists want that. They want more draconian measures put in place. The yes means yes laws, especially right now, that are going through. They are at the moment being proposed solely for people on campus, but they are talking about extending that to the law in general, the criminal law in the United States. And one of the horrible things about this yes means yes stuff
it's I have to jump in, I'm sorry, but it's a law that tells us how we need to have sex.
Oh yeah, no, it is. It
writes the script.
Yeah.
The ancient old script.
Yeah, no, it's like, and not just that. It's not just that they want to tell us how we're supposed to have sex, because obviously the way I want to have sex with my boyfriend is not acceptable, right? Because frankly, when it comes to rape in my household, by the feminist definition, probably happens 3 times a week. And it's, kind of 50-50 who's the perpetrator and who's the victim, right? At any given point, right? Because we don't have sex that way. And most people don't have sex that way. They don't ask for permission at every escalation of a sexual encounter. In fact, if you actually watch an enactment of 2 people doing that, it kind of feels creepy and weird. But what yes means yes actually does, and it's actually stood the test of an actual court of law, where a man who was expelled from a university based on yes means yes, which means that he has to affirmatively prove and demonstrate that she consented. So she doesn't have to demonstrate that he committed a crime. He has to demonstrate that he didn't commit a crime, right? The judge in that court said it reverses the burden of proof. What is going on? This cannot be. Will not stand in the law. It won't stand up to the law. But they're trying to make this the law across the United States. So, just
yeah. No. I think I've also found that there tends to be a sizable constituency of libertarians within the men's rights movement. I'm sure you've kind of found that too. Why do you think that is?
I think that libertarians tend to, it may be that libertarians tend to be a little bit more aspy than other people, right? Like they have this way, and people, and like, don't get me wrong, I'm a little aspy, and but they tend to have this way of being able to zoom in.
I'm kind of aspy too, so
there you go. Zoom in on an issue and really examine it, and then pull out and see how that issue fits in with all the wider issues, and stay really dispassionate about that. So it seems to be that that people who can separate their emotions from their uh, their sort of analysis of how things work, right? The matrix that we're living in, um, whether it's economic or political or gender or whatever, they seem to be more likely to end up libertarian and end up anti-feminist, right? So, and the men's rights movement, it was libertarian thinkers. It was almost entirely libertarians who carried the torch. From
Except for Bax.
Bax was a socialist Marxist, but he was ages and ages ago. He was like back in the 1910s, right?
Yeah.
1908, 1911. But I'm talking about, in the era of Warren Farrell, when he was, when he broke off, when he got booted out of feminism, right? I mean, this was a man who was twice elected to the board of the National Organization for Women's New York chapter, right? He was a staunch feminist until he started thinking, well, okay, but if women are paid 66 cents for, at that time, that's what they were saying, 66 cents on a man's dollar, why would anybody hire a man? So obviously there's something else going on here, right? Because if I could have a 33, 34 cent per hour advantage, or or per dollar advantage on my labor costs, I would certainly jump at the chance. I would hire only women, because if they're getting that for equal work, yeah, no, sign up, line up, ladies, you're hired. So he actually took a very analytical approach and found that a lot of the analysis of feminism was very, very surface level. It didn't look into anything deeper than just, here's what the average man is paid, here's what the average woman is paid, and we're just going to say that's unjust, things like that. And when he started asking questions about this stuff with his feminist friends at the National Organization for Women, they booted him out. And that was sort of at a time when there were sort of two branches of the men's movement. One was called the Mythopoetic Men's movement, which sided with feminism, and it was the we're going to have drum circles in the woods, and we're going to talk about our feelings, and we're going to have, we're going to like cut some onions so we can cry, and
Yeah, I've
do
I've
dream
noticed these
analysis.
two things. I've noticed these two streams as well. There's
Yeah.
the kind of airy fairy la-di-da-di kind of
Hmm.
men's issues stream, and then there's the more one that I relate to.
Oh yeah, yeah, no. I mean, the mythopoetic men's movement is sort of all about like why, men should be able to cry, men should be able to wear skirts, men should be able to wear pink, men should be able to, wear lipstick, and men should be able to talk about their feelings and be Alan Alda and still be sexy without all that Alan Alda cash that he
Yeah,
earned when he was in MASH. And with the rest of it, the libertarian branch of that was like, yeah, no, we just want equal representation under the law. We just want equal treatment under the law. We want alimony reform. We want all of these legal changes. And fuck all that eyeliner stuff and wearing pink. I don't care.
yeah, but because I think most men, it's not a case of like I think most men think, like, I know I can wear lipstick if I want. I know I can wear pink if I want, but I don't want to. That's not what I want. I want fair treatment.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's about.
Oh yeah. I think that really is, and it's most men are willing to not sweat the small stuff, right? So if somebody makes fun of their pink shirt, they just get a pink shirt that has the phrase "All my black shirts were in the laundry," and with the middle finger on it, right? Or what my dad does, right? He's this craggy faced like dude who looks like Clint Eastwood mummified, right? And yeah, because he's like in his 80s, and he's like really rough looking, and he was mauled by a dog and had his face reconstructed and all kinds of, like, so he's a really rough looking guy, and he walks around at the party with like his glass of pink wine and this look on his face like, yeah, call me a pussy, see what happens, right? Um, he's like totally shameless about it, and then he'll stick out his little finger, you know, um, and go, oh, you know. But I mean, it's just essentially like this is what, like, men don't really care about that kind of, like, when you're looking at the things that really make men commit suicide, that really drive them into despair, that leave them homeless on the streets. The primary issues are divorce, um, false accusations of all kinds of things, whether it's domestic violence or sexual assault or whatever, um, and domestic abuse, and the complete lack of compassion that they get when they're victims of that.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of it does not have to do with, oh, well, men couldn't talk about their feelings, so the only option they had was killing themselves. I think that's not, at least from my experience.
It's completely bogus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Men don't talk about their feelings the way women do, but they definitely talk about them. One of the things that was really insightful that someone named Tom Golden, he spoke at the first international conference on men's issues, and he's a psychologist who's been studying men, particularly how men grieve and heal, for decades. And what he said was, when you're sitting with a woman who's, she's your patient and you're her therapist, and you're sitting with her and you're making eye contact and you're leaning in and you're making eye contact with her, and it's very, very intimate, right? Because the eye contact signals into intimacy, right? And she opens up and she, spills her guts and she tells you all of her feelings, and it's all wonderful, right? But when a man does that to a man, that's not signaling into intimacy. That's signaling challenge and confrontation, right? Because we're still animals at heart, right? So when men actually talk about their feelings, they're much more likely to do it sitting back to back in a fishing boat, shoulder to shoulder at a workbench, right? Not looking each other in the eye, and not necessarily getting all emotive about it, not all effusive about it, but just kind of saying what they think.
Yeah.
And they absolutely will share if you know how to listen to them.
Yeah, not only that, but the other day I read an article that was referencing a study that kind of conclusively found that men, it's not that they don't deal with their emotions, they just take proactive steps to dealing with them. Like, whereas a woman might go to her friend to go talk about her feelings, a man might go to his friend to go out and, I don't know, have a drink and watch movies or something. Like something proactive.
Yeah, they take an action. They do.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever saw this. Anybody who's listening right now should look it up. It's a YouTube video called "It's Not the Nail," and that is really the difference between that is explicitly in that video, and it's very, very funny, and it's amusing, but it's explicitly the difference between how men deal with problems and how women deal with their problems, right? Women often just want to vent. They just want to vent their spleen. They just want to talk about it and get it out. They don't want you to solve their problem, right? So when you have a man and a woman, and the woman's expressing some kind of frustration, and the man he's appearing to not even listen to her or not empathize with her, but what he's really doing is trying to figure out, okay, how can I fix this, right? What advice can I give that will help her fix this, right? What course of action can I recommend that will help her fix this? And then he'll tell her that course of action. She'll be like, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen, right? Whereas with men, it's they want to take an action. And this is what seems to be the driving force between the difference in male and female suicide, is that when men have a problem that's really, really hurting them, they feel a compulsion to take some action to fix it, right? Women can sometimes be okay just bitching about it, right? Men feel a compulsion to fix it, and if there is no way to fix it, then they don't see a way out, because just bitching isn't going to fix it. That's why they don't go and get counseling, right? That's why most male suicides didn't go and see a counselor. They didn't go, because what's a counselor going to do? Just listen to them bitch.
Do you think that it might be possible that men commit suicide because when they do seek help, they feel like they're not understood, because the psychological field kind of views masculinity as a problem, and they don't view men as having problems, but men as being problems in and of
Oh,
themselves.
certainly, certainly. I think that the entire field of psychology is sort of it's geared toward female ways of grieving, female ways of healing, female ways of communicating, and and it is very, very much female dominated now, and that's because I think women are more expressive with their emotions, right? They're more likely to express any given emotion at any given time than a man is. So essentially, especially the negative ones like sadness, loneliness, despair, despondency, fear, right? Anxiety, those things. Um, Anger, they seem to do okay with, but there are reasons for that. There are evolutionary reasons for that. Um, but essentially, you have an entire field that's designed to help people that's really geared towards the way that women need to be helped. And so when men go in, even if they have a sympathetic counselor, even if they have a counselor that doesn't see masculinity as a problem, that doesn't necessarily mean that the counselor knows anything about masculinity, um, or how men deal with their feelings or anything like that. So,
Yeah, um, I've been seeing that too, to be honest, and I think that is a big issue at the
mm,
moment. I just want to circle around to back to feminism and ask you. So we have these kind of libertarian feminists like Christina Hoff Sommers, Wendy McElroy, or McElroy, I'm not sure how you say it, uh, Camille Paglia.
mm.
Do you think they can save feminism? If and does feminism, is it worth being saved?
I think that pardon me, sorry, allergies. I think that their conceptualization of feminism is actually very, very different from what the mainstream of feminism always has been. So even if you go back to, like, I know that Christina Hoff Sommers feels like that feminism has this noble tradition, this noble historical tradition, right? That's rooted in the Enlightenment and all of that. Well, the Enlightenment did um, set the conditions that allowed feminism to happen, right? But that doesn't mean that feminism embraces, on the whole, the values of the Enlightenment. And I don't think it ever did. I mean, if you go back to the Declaration of Sentiments and you look at that bullet point list of grievances and you see that they blame men for every single thing, and that the entire history of mankind is a history of his usurpations and tyrannies over women.
Yeah, and they
Um,
literally call men oppressors in the Declaration of Sentiments. Like,
yeah,
yeah, domestic, like oppressors at home, in the home.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, and that they, what was the one that really got me in light of the Tender Years Doctrine and the patriarchal male privilege of getting the kids and the bill and the misogyny of the women getting the kids and child support, um, is was the bullet point that men have have arranged things such that uh, in the when it comes to divorce and all of that, it doesn't consider at all the happiness of the woman. And I'm thinking, it doesn't consider the happiness of the man. It considers that he's the one who pays for everything, right? That's why it wasn't about his happiness. It was about who's paying for shit, right? And so they essentially turned it around so that the system prioritized women's happiness, right? And really just kept men paying for shit. And who cares if they're happy, right? Because we never cared that they were happy. That's not why we gave them custody. So yeah, no, it was just absolutely, the document itself is just, it's just like an orgy of man hating
Hmm.
and man blaming. And so if you think that that's the noble beginnings of a noble tradition, right? And that somehow feminism lost its way and became man-hating in the 80s or whenever it is that you think it lost its way. Yeah, no, no, it was
No.
always, and I don't, so I appreciate, I absolutely appreciate Christina Hoff Sommers and Wendy McElroy and Camille Paglia and all of these women, I tend to see them as individualists, not feminists, right? And I don't think that they can rescue feminism, because I don't think that it was ever a damsel. It was a harridan the whole time. It was a virago the entire time. It was never a damsel. So.
I think that's a great answer. I can't help to agree with you. So there's this thing that I came across today, and I thought I'm going to ask Karen what she thinks of this.
Uh-oh.
So some feminist page online on Facebook shared a little meme that kind of explained a new word, and it's called man-jacking, which kind of sounds like a porn term, but
well, so does man-spreading, and so does man-slamming, so I don't know why man-jacking would be any different.
So it's defined as the phenomenon of men hijacking a conversation, hearing a forum about women's rights, and interjecting their opinions to make it all about them and their issues.
I thought we already had names for that. It was derailing and sea lioning. But but wait, derailing doesn't have man in it, and sea lioning doesn't have man in it. So I guess we need a man jacking. Yeah, no, and I would say to men out there, men everywhere, man jack away. It's not illegal yet. It's not like man spreading, right? You can't get arrested for it yet.
Just don't man jack in public.
If the UN has its way, it might be, so get your man jacking in while you can. God. What, like, how can anybody take any of this seriously? And can we think up, I want to think, for my speech at your event, at the Men's Issues Awareness Society's event, I'm going to come up with some terms. Okay, I got femsplaining. Okay, femsplaining is when a feminist tells a man what it really is like to be a man and why men think and feel the way and they do, and why they do the things they do. It's a feminist essentially telling a man he's all wrong about his own experience. So I need a few others. If anybody in the chat or in the comments of this video can make any suggestions of portmanteaus with the word femme that I can sort of stack up against the man-slamming, man-splaining, man-spreading, man-jacking, man stuff, you just go ahead and suggest them.
I'll send you my suggestions periodically as well.
Right. I want, actually, maybe we can Google bomb it, I seem to recall Dan Savage of Savage Love, the gay sex advice columnist, managing to make it so that the first 1,000 results on Google, when anybody searched for the words for the name Santorum, when Rick Santorum was running like 10 years ago, came up as oh God, can I say this on the air? That frothy mix of lube and fecal matter that is sometimes the unwanted byproduct of anal sex. That was the definition of Santorum 10 years ago, right? So anybody who was searching for Rick Santorum, the first 1,000 or so Google hits would be that. And I think that we can, just with a little bit of effort, we can Google bomb some good femme terms and make them, or even just some names. We're going to pull a Marcotte. We're going to pull a Valenti. To pull a Marcotte, to pull a Valenti, and just associate those names with. Yeah. With
they should spread the culture like memes, like.
There you go.
All these feminist terms do, yeah.
Like meme with meme.
Exactly. Not just some casual questions. What's the most memorable moment that you had during your time as an advocate for men's issues and men's rights?
I don't know that there is one. I don't know that there is a single most memorable moment. I mean, I've enjoyed all of the travel. Well, I've hated all of the traveling I've done, but I've enjoyed all of the places I've gone. I guess maybe the most memorable is sort of when I occasionally get you know, really, really poorly
It's
spelled
every
and
time
badly
I inbox
formatted
you.
threats. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's every time I see you in my inbox, Theryn.
That was a right-wrong question. You got that one wrong.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Theryn. You'll have to forgive me. So.
Um, I actually, for some reason, didn't think you were going to have a straight answer to that. Because I felt like you would have talked about it already, but you never have, so I thought that was going to be the answer.
Oh
Okay.
well, yeah. No, it's definitely. I mean, it's a mixed bag. It's a whole bunch of really wonderful things, a few really crappy things, and it's just been a wonderful experience overall. So.
Um, One more kind of casual question. What books are you currently reading, and what movies have you watched most recently that you actually enjoyed?
Okay, what books am I currently reading? None at the moment. There is one that I am about to purchase called The Privileged Sex. It's available on Amazon, and it's essentially sort of a reverse coin, examination. Look at the other side of the coin, um, about the sort of the relationship between men and women in society, and what we all sort of feel, but none of us really realized. This seems to be the ongoing theme in my work, is that people are like, oh, I've been feeling this, but I could never articulate it, right? I never, and I thought I was going crazy, and now I know I'm not. So there's that one. I don't tend to read a lot of books because they tend to have an overarching thesis, and I tend to really like to read research papers and columns and have discussions and then sort of generate my own thesis. But as far as movies, oh God, it's been a while since I watched a movie. Although just tonight I watched the season closer of Rick and Morty, and it ended on a very, very sad note. And I've really enjoyed that series a lot. And I just there are some Netflix series that I like to watch, and essentially, I think the Avengers: Age of Ultron I just watched the other day, and oh God, I can't remember the rest of them. It's just in one ear and out the other, or in my eyes and out the back of my head. So, but
Yeah, I've been really enjoying X-Files. Watching
oh, but
recently.
that's so old.
I know.
I know, it's ancient.
Yeah,
You must have seen the one with the guy who can like stretch and like go down chimneys,
yeah,
and
yeah. I
oh, that
watched
was
that one.
that guy is so creepy. That actor who
Yeah,
plays that guy.
he
Oh,
is. He is.
he just plays it so well. So yeah.
Um, those are pretty much all the questions I have for you.
All
I
right.
think that really pretty much covered it for those who want to come watch the regional conference on November 7th. Uh, Come join us. That'll be great. So yeah, November 7th at Robson Square, UBC. Karen Straughan will be there. She'll be talking about whether or not feminism is liberty friendly. Um, and I'm super excited, and I hope to see as many of you guys there as possible. And thank you so much for tuning in if you're watching live. And I am looking forward to your feedback in the comment section. Okay, guys. Say bye, Karen.
Bye, Karen. I mean, Theron.